Okay, so today, if you got the material that I sent, which is fairly long this time, you'll hold on. We just got a couple more people coming in. So we're going to focus on how part of how the Seder is going, or what to do. Hold on. Okay. The Seder developed over in time and history, as we all know, because it's there's so many things that have been changing. But the point that the rabbis that in our sages tried to make is that the whole point of the Seder is to teach gratitude. So, and the way that they did it actually focuses on the one tune that is the most familiar of all, besides the Monish Tanah, is the Dayenu, and everyone is like familiar. That hold on for one quick second. Okay. All right. So we're going to kind of see how this whole thing on gratitude is how it kind of develops. So let me get this screen up for a second. All right. So the first thing that I just want to kind of point out is how there was a article written in 2021 about how gratitude can make you 25% happier. And it says studies show that the practicing gratitude for just 5 minutes a day can make you 25% happier. It's called the nun study because it was done with some nuns on basically how to be more grateful. And one of the things they found out is people that are grateful, they build a stronger immune system, experience less pain, have lower blood pressure, and they're better at taking steps for daily exercises, looking after their health. So basically, and also on a social level, they feel less isolated. So the more gratitude you feel or express, however you want to look at that, is it's kind of how kind of makes you feel better. Now, you can actually you can kind of look at the article yourself, but we're going to look at the Dayenu. This comes straight from the straight from the Haggadah. The translation down here is based on the Sefaria translation, so maybe a little different than the Haggadot you're coming to, but this is the basic translation. First thing I want to kind of look at, if you can, anyone know and unless you have it in front of you, it's kind of hard, but anybody know how many stanzas are there in Dayenu? I don't know. No one ever thinks about it. There are 15.
Hmm.
Yeah. How many steps are there in the Seder?
15?
Bingo. You're very good.
That was
What's
the
the
guess,
date?
but all right.
What's the date of Passover? What day of the month? Bob, you're kind of going like,
Is it the first day of
no,
Adar?
it's the
No,
15th,
the 15th of, wait a minute,
Nisan.
Nisan. Yeah.
The 15th of Nisan. How many steps? How many steps did one have to ascend to go from on the main steps to get from like the Temple Mount until the tent of meeting or the Holy of Holies itself? How many steps were there from the Temple Mount to the Holy of Holies?
15?
Bingo! I tell you, this is a great question.
That was another guess, but
So you can kind of see a little pattern, that's been developing. Now, what I'd like is for someone I know we've all sang Dayenu 110, 1,000 times. I don't know how many people have actually read it in English. So do I have a volunteer for someone who'd like to read the Dayenu in English? Either in front of you or the one on the screen. Okay, anyone want to volunteer? All right, Bob, go ahead.
How much good, layer upon layer, has God done for us? Had God brought us out of Egypt without bringing judgment upon our oppressors, that would have been enough for us. Had God brought judgment upon them, but not upon their gods, that would have been enough for us. Had God brought judgment upon their gods without killing their firstborn sons, that would have been enough for us. Had God killed their firstborn sons without giving us their wealth, that would have been enough for us. Had God given us their wealth without splitting the sea for us, that would have been enough for us. Had God split the sea for us, but not brought us through it dry, that would have been enough for us. Had God brought us through the sea dry without drowning our enemies in it, that would have been enough for us. Had God drowned our enemies in it without providing for our needs for 40 years in the desert, that would have been enough for us. Had God provided for our needs for 40 years in the desert without feeding us with manna, that would have been enough for us. Had God fed us with manna without giving us Shabbat, that would have been enough for us. Had God given us Shabbat without drawing us close around Mount Sinai, that would have been enough for us. Had God drawn us close around Mount Sinai without giving us the Torah, that would have been enough for us. Had God given us the Torah without bringing us to the land of Israel, that would have been enough for us. Had God brought us to the land of Israel without building for us the house God chose, that would have been enough for us. How many and manifold then God's kindnesses are to us, for God brought us out of Egypt and brought judgment upon our oppressors and upon their gods, and God killed their firstborn sons and gave us their wealth, and God split the sea for us and brought us through it on dry land and drowned our enemies, and God provided for our needs for 40 years in the desert and fed us manna, and God gave us Shabbat, and God drew us close around Mount Sinai and gave us the Torah, and God brought us to the land of Israel and built for us the house God chose so we could find atonement there for all our sins.
Thank you. Was any of that surprising to anybody?
Yes.
Which part, Bob?
I had heard like the first 8 or so, but the ones about bringing us to Israel in such detail and the tabernacle and his house, I was not familiar with.
So what do you think is the point of Dayenu? What should we be if the whole idea is gratitude, what should we be thankful for?
Anything God does is enough.
Anything God does is enough. All right, that's cool. That happens to be a very 21st century thought. I think that's great. The Dayenu was actually written in the 9th century. It was first appeared in Rav Saji Gaon's Haggadah. Saji Gaon he made a prayer book, a Siddur, and a Haggadah. So the first time we see the Dayenu happens to be during that, in that particular book. And there's some things that are really interesting. So the first part, I want to just kind of show you the Hebrew. Interesting translation. The first verse is Kama ma'alot tovot lemakom, which actually means how many good steps have there made for us, and not how much good layer upon layer. I mean, that's a nice translation, but it's actually how many steps has God done for us, and it identifies 15 steps. And the 15 steps all lead to the temple. So at the end of the Haggadah, when we say L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim, what is it actually referring to?
The temple.
Exactly. And now, how many people want to go back and have the temple rebuilt?
Yeah.
My guess is nobody.
Oh.
I mean, if you think about it, if you're going to it's kind of a question. First of all, the location is in a bad spot. That's one. It's being on the Temple Mount will bring a politically huge issue. There are people that are planning. And when I say planning, I do mean in this serious way. There are people that are actually planning to build the temple. They get everything ready. All they need is the temple. It just happens to be in a bad place. Those people, I believe, are somewhat dangerous to Judaism, but they're very few. They actually do it. It's called It's called Yeshivat HaKotel. It's the yeshiva that's actually, if you're ever been to the Kotel, to the Western Wall, there's this huge building to the left of it, some windows and stuff. That's where that school is actually there and kids are learning how to redo, when the temple's rebuilt, how to do all the sacrifices and stuff. So it's kind of an interesting thing. I don't know what they'll do for a living, but I mean, that's kind of an interesting thing. There's also another thing here. Look at this at the very beginning. God brought judgment upon them, but not upon their gods. That would have been enough for us. Had God brought judgment upon their gods without killing their firstborn? What gods? Are there other gods? Yeah, Ellen.
Oh, well, the Egyptians, I think, had a sun god, and I mean, they had a number of gods that they worshipped, but we don't. I don't know. I don't think the Jews did either, but there were. I mean, the Egyptians had some gods, and Pharaoh apparently was a god.
Could God have brought judgment upon their gods?
Well, if he did upon Pharaoh, he lost his firstborn.
Well, it
So it's
suggests
God.
that their gods exist.
Pharaoh existed. He was one of their gods. He was.
Do we believe that there are other gods?
According to the Egyptians, Pharaoh was a god. I don't believe he was a god, but
No, that's not the question. Do we believe that, putting Egypt aside, or including Egypt, are there other gods? And Adonai, our God, capital G, is the top god.
No?
That was a question, Angela. That wasn't a The answer is, it's an interesting question, because in the liturgy, the answer is yes.
Oh my
I mean, first of all, it's right here in front of you. God brought judgment, but not upon their gods. And also, the Micha Mocha that we say every single time we get together, Micha Mocha be'elim Adonai, who is like you, God, among the other gods.
That's right. We do say that. Yeah.
So the liturgy actually kind of hints to the fact that that if there are other gods, our God is number one. Okay, so that's a kind of an interesting way of looking at it. So what do we, so the idea is that we're supposed to be grateful. It would have been enough, but is there a Dayenu that, is at any point here, is it really Dayenu? Are we really saying that would have been enough? The answer is no, because we actually get this house that God chose. We're talking the temple. And what's the purpose of that house? And if you go all the way down to the very end, so we can find atonement there for our sins. The purpose of the temple is to do sacrifices. And the purpose of the sacrifice is to ask for atonement for all number of different things. Yeah, Ellen.
Our prayer and our Torah compensate us for the loss of the temple and sacrificial system. And I think after 2,000 years, we're pretty used to it. Don't you think it'll be a real reversion to antiquity to go back to sacrificing actual animals rather than praying and reading the Torah, which is what we do?
Yes. In answer to that long question, yes. But can we still find atonement in there? Now,
We do. We
And-
do.
if you do find atonement, is it something that you're thankful for? If you're coming there with a guilt offering, you did something wrong, you feel guilty, you put your, go in for your sacrifice, which happens to be this week's Torah portion too. So it's not just coincidental that it's happening right before Passover as well. So you do this whole, sacrifice, and the idea is that afterwards you're supposed to feel some gratitude that your prayer was answered, you were forgiven for what you did wrong, you are now clean. If you were impure, you're now pure. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons why people would bring the sacrifice. So whatever it is, you become, the idea is to be thankful, to be grateful for whatever it is that you got. Can we do that without the temple? Yeah, Bob.
Well, I think that there are many ways that people seek to seek for their version of peace or connection or favor of the gods. And I think if one knows of several ways to do that, one, in a sense, has a choice. If one grows up in a culture where there's one way to do that, that becomes the important way to do it. So it was, I guess, fine for them if one doesn't mind killing animals. But we grew up in a different culture, and I think that we have another way to atone and to reach for God or spirituality. And I've heard someone say, perhaps it was at Gates of Heaven, I can't recall, that atonement breaks down to at one-ment. So at one-ment with God, perhaps, or one's nature, etc.
Okay, that's a good one. I mean, yeah, Ellen.
And we are constantly giving to the temple and doing good deeds, and charity wise, we're constantly doing that. Giving to our temple, should I say.
Right.
If we belong, I mean, we have dues, and there's a constant call for giving every week.
Yep, that's very true. Now, here's the interesting thing, though. This prayer, the Dayenu, initially was written as an anti-Christian polemic. It was, what you say God has, died, you say Jesus died for your sins, and thus you are all saved. What this is showing that these are the different steps that our God did for us, culminating in the building of that temple, which gives us the opportunity to have atonement. Whereas, so it's kind of like it was a comparison between what 9th century Catholicism at that point trying to preach as compared to what Rav Sadia Gaon was trying to preach at the same time. Also, it's also based on Deuteronomy 26, which again, as I told you, there are 3 places that talks about the coming out, what we're supposed to talk about at the Seder. Deuteronomy 26 is one of them. So this is based on those particular steps. In the 15th century, in source 3, the Rabbi Lau of Maharal of Prague, and this is the rabbi that's associated with the Golem. So to give you some historical, I mean, the Golem may or may not have existed. Rabbi Lau did exist. And he says these 15 steps can be divided into 3 groups. The first group deals with the actual exodus from the lowliness of slavery in Egypt. There was no ascent here, only the going out of Egypt, so that they were no longer slaves. In the first grouping, God took them out, meted judgment out to the Egyptians, to their gods, killed the firstborn, gave the Israelites great wealth. This was all part of the actual exodus. The middle group of the 5 steps, with an ascent through the miracles that took place through the exodus. This grouping deals with things that happened after they left Egypt, splitting of the sea, allowing them to pass on dry land, drowning the enemies, providing them with food, giving them manna. The final group of 5 levels the final group of 5 levels is the completion of their unification and Israel's cleaving to God. The final grouping deals with divine commandments, which allow Israel to cleave to God. God gave them the Shabbat. There can be little doubt that the Sabbath is a sign of Israel's covenant, the beginning of their connection to God. The building of the temple, which represented God's dwelling place among them, so that there was an absolute connection between God and Israel. Even as late as 15th century Judaism, there was a belief that temple was God's dwelling place. It isn't until much later in history that we kind of start getting a little way away from that. Even though the temple was destroyed in the at 70 CE, but still in the 1400s, that the liturgy and everything is like we face east. A whole night is for the deals with all of prayer deals with facing Jerusalem, praying for the rebuilding of Jerusalem, and the daily prayers of the Amidah. There's a whole section of the rebuilding of Jerusalem, which the Reform movement and the Conservative movement in their newest prayer book have rejected, because they don't want us to, we're not trying to rebuild the temple. Yeah, Ellen.
Yeah, we do many of us, most of us, do feel that Israel is a central tenet of our Judaism. And I have been to the Western Wall, and there is something that moves me there. I'm not saying I want to go to the Temple Mount where there's a problem, but Israel is a special place. But I don't want to go back to the sacrificial system that they're talking about. But I feel for myself, Israel is central to my Judaism, and I think many Jews do feel that.
I think you're right about that.
Mhm.
I think that it may be essential. My question here is, how does this have to do with gratitude? Because that's the part that we're going to get into. On the fourth source, Rabbi Sheila Peltz Weinberg, in her Haggadah that she wrote, it's called The Night of Questions. Dayenu signifies deep acceptance and gratitude. We acknowledge the present moment. In the affirmation of Dayenu, we are fully present to the preciousness of each act and redemption and care, dividing the sea, leading us across, carrying us through desert. We receive each moment with love. This acceptance allows us to move to the next moment and receive the waiting gift. We greet each moment with conditions, judgment, expectations. Well, isn't this quite where we need to be? Or wait a second, this is not what we were promised. Or hey, what's coming next? Our expectations keep us tense. We are not free. We're not available to receive the next moment. Our fantasies about the past and our desire to control the future cuts us off from the wonders of this moment. They shut us in a prison of disappointment and suffering. Dayenu is a great liberator. It is a jolt into the presence of awe, compassion, intention, and freedom. The whole way that this whole thing has been presented actually gives us the opportunity to be thankful, to kind of like get back to, oh yeah, maybe we should be thankful. Maybe we should be, thankful. So I have a question for folks, and either put it in the chat or feel free to yell it out. What's your Dayenu moment? What's your Dayenu? What would you say you are thankful for? And you could say, Dayenu, it's enough. I'm good. Yeah, Alan?
Life, being alive at this point. By the way, Sheila Peltz, I
Yeah.
remember being in camp with a very dynamic young woman when I was 12, and her name was Sheila Peltz. And I'm wondering if it's the same person. This was
Most
at
probably.
Ramah. This was at Camp Ramah. Is she about my age? Do you have any idea?
Yep. Yeah, that's Haggadah was written a while ago. Yeah, Bob.
I'm thankful for a lifetime with my first girlfriend.
Okay.
Aw, that's so sweet.
Okay. I mean, so
It's right next to you, right?
oh yeah, it's kind of the I think it's interesting if you think about it, like, what do you really think? What is your Dayenu? What can you actually say, Dayenu? Like, okay, I'm thankful. I'm good. If this is all I get, I'd be fine. When you look at the Dayan and all the different steps there, it isn't, the fact that, if we didn't, if we didn't get the Torah, that, it didn't get Shabbat, that would be fine. It wouldn't have been, these steps are ones that we needed in our growth, but, go ahead, Bob.
Well, I would think of Dayenu in the context of time. I think that accepting the reality of the moment is essential to mental health. But that doesn't mean you have to accept things in the future that you may be able to take actions to impact. So moment by moment, you're accepting reality, but that doesn't mean you can't make plans and have effective action,
True.
in my humble opinion.
Okay. I think that's very true. I think Dayenu, one of the things on our on the source number 5, that Erica Brown's discussion. It's called the Jewish Template for Gratitude, and it's It was in My Jewish Learning, and you can see it. You can actually click on the article itself. But she ends up, Dayenu is not merely a reflection of Passover, but a template for true thanks. I think accepting the moment, taking where you are, if I could use a Zen thing, stop trying to, block out things that are in your head, accept them for what they are, and, just take yourself where you are and then kind of go from there. But don't block out all the other, all the things, all the other parts, and you get a much better sense of self. I think that when you sing Dayenu this year, go around the table, ask people, what is their Dayenu? What would you say that this is good? Angela, thank you for that link. That was very.
You're welcome. Thank you too. That was awesome.
I think, what's your Dayenu moment this year? And, it's kind of interesting because we say in the Haggadah, L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem, it actually refers to the temple, but we've evolved to a different sense that, next year in Jerusalem could mean a whole different things. It meant something totally different a year ago than it does today. The Jerusalem that was meant a year ago was only just a few months, was just, just a few months after October 7th. So it's now, there's still hostages out there, and there's still a war in Gaza. The stock market is doing its up and down thing. There's so many things going on. I think Passover is a time to stop and say, all right, yeah, there are a lot of issues happening, but we're still in a Dayenu moment. What are we thankful for? Because we have to keep that part of it to continue going. Folks, have a very, very happy Passover.
Thank you. You too.
And enjoyable. I hope you have a very meaningful Seder.
This was very good.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Yeah.
This was great.
Thank you.
Thank
Chag
you.
Sameach, everybody.
Chag Sameach.